very excited to welcome my friend, Michaela. Are you taking a picture?
I might be.
I might be. You gotta
I'm
give me a
happy to
heads up,
be
girl.
here.
That's amazing. I love it. Well, I'm going to take one of you too when you're not expecting. I'm joking.
Okay.
Smile. All right. I'm Rebecca Hay, and I've built a successful interior design business by trial and error, podcasts, online courses, and so many freaking books. Over the last decade, I've grown from an insecure student to having false starts to careers, and now I'm finally in the place where I want to be. Throughout my journey, it's been pretty obvious that I'm passionate about business and helping other entrepreneurs do the same. Each week, I'll share tangible takeaways from my own experience and the experiences of other badass women to help you build your confidence and change your business.
Right.
Welcome to the podcast. Can you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Thank you so much for having me, Rebecca. I'm super excited to be here. So I am Michaela Burns. My company name is Michaela Burns Interiors, but that's all part of the story that we're going to tell today. We are a residential interior decor and design firm based in Toronto. The majority of our clients are based in Toronto, and also there are clients' corresponding vacation properties.
Love it. I'm so excited to have you here. I've been following along. I think we've been in business more or less the same amount of time, like about a decade, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I started out on my own in 2015. I was working for somebody else for a few years prior.
Yes, our stories are very similar. It's funny, we have recently realized our stories are more similar than we thought. We both lived in
Hmm.
Vancouver. We both have had so many. We lived in the same building in Toronto, I think,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, like
yes,
so, but not
exactly.
before we knew each other,
Yeah,
which is super cool. And when I first found you, I don't even know how or where. It's probably through Instagram.
yeah,
Um, you had a different company name. And so I'm really
that's
excited to
right.
dive into, and you've had that same company name for 10 years until very recently. I think it was last year you did a rebrand and not only
Yeah.
changed the like vibe and look and color, but the name of your business. So guys, you're going to
Hmm.
like this. I can't wait to dive into all these things. Before we get to the branding and the renaming of your business and all the things that you do, can you just give everyone a little bit of insight into what was it like in the early years when you first started your design firm? Like what type of projects were you doing? What was the name of your company?
Hmm.
What was the
Hmm.
decision behind that name and all the things?
Sure. So I went back to school to take interior decor at George Brown starting in 2011. And it's a 2-year program. I think it took me about 3 years. I had my first kid in there somewhere. And in the second year of the program, we took a business class in which we had to come up with our business name and start to put together business paperwork. We started, we did invoices and purchase orders, and we mocked up really the full paperwork of a project in order to get, a little bit more familiar with it. So I came up with the idea for my business name at that time called Mint Decor. And little do you know the impact that's going to have on your business, right? Because what you start to make connections during design school and you start to take on jobs. And so you just use this name that you did in your business class.
Mm.
So, I'll get to that. But the reason I started with the name Mint Decor is in 2011, 2012. My name is Michaela Burns, but I had only recently been married. I was married in 2010 and I took my husband's name. So, for the first 29 years of my life, my name was Michaela O'Connor. And here I am potentially starting a business under this name, Michaela Burns. And it just didn't feel like my name yet. Burns did not feel like my last name. And also in 2011, when you were telling somebody your company name, they were finding you by typing out a URL. They weren't following you from Instagram to the extent that they are now. So I
Mm.
also had grown up with a first name that nobody could spell. And therefore I thought, if I'm telling somebody my company name is Michaela Burns, are they going to be able to find me again? So those were kind of the two factors that led me to pick a name, a company name that wasn't my own name and was something that's, very recognizable, easy to spell. I also always enjoyed the color, mint green. And I thought that it reflected what my brand felt like at the time, which was approachable and fresh.
Love that.
Luckily for me, mint has maintained to be like a very popular color throughout all of the trends. So I didn't outgrow the name because of the color. It's actually a kind of a funny story how I outgrew it. So all that to say, I started with this concept of mint decor, and it just stuck with me. And as I graduated from school, I first started by working for another company called Modern Staging, Modern Spaces in Toronto. And so my own name wasn't important, right? I was just a contractor billing to her. And then after working for that company for about 2 years, I was staging homes for sale and then also doing some design work. That was a really great transition for me because when you work for a staging company, you learn how to decorate a space really fast. Now you're using a really limited toolkit, right? You've got a warehouse full of a pretty generic set of furniture, and you are not personalizing this home for a client. In fact, you're doing the opposite when you're staging, right? You're depersonalizing. But it gave me the skills to walk into a room and really quickly, like a puzzle, figure out, okay, if this is where the sofa is going to go, then this is the TV and this is the dining table. And so I was able, it was a really great way to hone the skill of space planning on my feet. Then about halfway through the time working with the staging company, we staged a home for sale for a client, and we got along with her really well. And so she then hired us to decorate the new house that she purchased. So that was my first big decorating job, and I still keep in touch with this woman who was the client. She, I think, was an angel sent from heaven because she had a really interesting art collection. She had eclectic personal style, and she just brought us in and really like gave us the opportunity to show our skills. And she was collaborative, a dream client. And near the end of the project, she pulled me aside and she said, you don't need this company anymore, like the company I'd been working for. She's like, you have proven to me that you're ready to do this on your own.
Wow. That's
Yeah. And
amazing. You must have felt like, how did you feel in that moment?
I was on cloud nine, like absolutely. And as a little aside, this really serendipitous moment of all of this is she was moving out on her own because she had just been divorced. And in that exact same moment in time, my sister, who had just graduated law school, was given her first big break with an articling job at her dream firm. And it was from the ex husband.
No.
So this couple had both given my sister and I really the starts to our career without any knowledge that, it was happening on the other side of the city.
Oh my gosh. I hope you share this episode with this couple because that's
Yeah.
amazing. I love hearing
Yeah.
that. I also love that you started with staging, which, by the way, sidebar, my first job out of design school was with a home staging company as well. It was in
Okay. Okay.
Vancouver.
Now I'm getting goosebumps. Yeah.
Now this is so weird. It's like weird. We can talk about that offline. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting because we do have a lot of stagers who listen to this podcast and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of stagers who get asked, like to your point, to your example, they get asked to, well, you staged the home so beautifully in my new house. Can I hire you to decorate? And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
stagers can get nervous because it's a little bit of a different skill set, but they are tied
Mm-hmm.
in. And I love that this is a great story for those stagers who are listening, or for anyone who hasn't even started yet. They're thinking about launching a business and they're listening and they're thinking, can I just start with staging? Like, or do I have to jump into the full service? And I think this is another great
Mm-hmm.
example of you start where you get the opportunities and you go from there. And so it's like a
Yeah.
little bit of a launch pad. That's so cool.
Yeah, it was a great opportunity to start. It gets you into a lot of houses really quickly, right? You're typically in 2 or 3 different houses a week, and you're
Mm,
meeting realtors that are educating you a lot about what's happening in the market. And by working with realtors and working in situations in which houses are trying to get gussied up to sell, you start to understand what's valuable in the market. Because when you're working with design clients, they want to make improvements to their home, but they also want to make sure that they're spending money in the right places. I think, though, that the key point, if you are going to start with staging, but your end goal is design, is to know when to cut ties with the staging and just move forward with design.
right.
Because it's a big, if you want to make a very successful staging company, it is a big investment and you can't get out of it easily, right? Like if you get to a point where you're very
Yeah.
successful, you're going to have a large warehouse space, you're going to have a delivery team, you're going to have very select vendor relationships, and that doesn't really translate fully to design, right? Your vendor
Mhm.
relationships will be different. You won't be managing your own inventory the same way. So I do think that is a turning point where you have to let the past be the past and move
Yeah.
forward with
Yeah,
design.
I think that's really great advice, Michaela. That was my experience, and I haven't really reflected on it before now. But I was, when I first went out on my own, doing some staging because let's be honest, I was just happy to bring in any
Yeah.
kind of money and I would take on
Yeah.
any job. But then I got to the point where I was staging, but to your point, I didn't have a warehouse. So I was having to rent other people's
Hmm.
things, which made it more expensive for me to do the staging. And I had to make a decision. And I could keep going that way, but because I started getting decorating projects, you're right. I remember saying no to a staging job and being nervous and thinking, oh, was that the
Hmm.
right move? But then I thought,
Yeah.
yeah, it could be quick cash, but there is still a lot of work involved. And if I'm going to really lean into decorating and design, that's where I'm going to go. And then I remember making that, I took it off my website, right? I had it on my website
Hmm.
previously. I was like, nope, I'm not doing staging anymore. And I took that leap. And I think this is great advice for anyone, maybe who's dabbling in design as a hobby, right? It's
Hmm.
like you can't do everything 100%. Be
Yeah.
known for something, be known for one thing. And I know I'm going through this personally, like I'll share candidly in my coaching business. I'm like, what is it for me?
Hmm.
Like now that I'm
Hmm.
not pursuing design jobs, I mean, I have maybe at one job a year. I've got a really great job right now, and that's wonderful. But as I let that go and I move more into the online space, like what is it? Like what area am I known for? And I think that that's where the power is. And that's where people can start to scale and build a name for themselves when you get
Hmm.
super
Hmm.
clear on what your offering is. I mean, I talk about this in Power of Process all the time, but what is your offering and who do you
Hmm.
serve? And I want to talk about that for you because it sounds like right from the get-go, you were very keenly aware of what you needed to scale your business, to grow your business. Like you were like, nope, I'm going to leave the staging and I'm going to move into this area. Was that a scary decision to make, to kind of go all in on design and decor and leave staging
It,
behind?
I mean, it wasn't because I wasn't holding the inventory for the staging company. I worked for somebody else. And it happened to coincide about the time where I decided to make that change. She actually decided to move back to Vancouver with her family. So she was shutting down the business. So it was in a lot of ways that was a blessing because I probably would have had a hard time saying no to her. Right. I really enjoyed
Mm-hmm.
working for her. And just one other aside, when all of us interested in design, we're often starting as a one-man show and having the opportunity to work with a larger company like a staging company or a design company is a really great start at the beginning because I got to see how she operated a mature business and I learned so much at the very beginning. I also saw how she handled difficult situations with clients and realtors and I still like recall that now. You know, she had this real composure and patience and generosity when in a tough situation with people and I think that has helped me. So that's just an aside that it's
Mm,
always great to work with somebody at the beginning who's got
100%.
it all figured out. So was it scary? It was, but again, I was young. I was only working part-time because I had two young children at that point. So my goal starting out when I started on my fully on my own as Mint Decor was to cover my childcare costs. That was my goal. And I
That's
had
great though.
part-time
It's
childcare
good to
costs.
have a goal, right? I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
that.
yeah, because it was early on. I thought, you know what, if I had gone back to work full time, I was an HR consultant before I went back to school. I would have these childcare costs, right? I would have full-time daycare. And I only have part-time daycare now because I'm working 3 days a week. So that was my goal was to cover those costs. And as my business increased, my childcare needs increased. And that has always been kind of my benchmark is to make sure I'm covering those costs until, I got to a point where the business took on a life of its own. So once I started on my own, I would say my projects were typically redecorating the main floor of a family home. And it was in a fairly light way. There was no construction, there was no new cabinetry. It was wallpaper, lighting, rugs, furniture, paint, window treatments. And I would go anywhere for these jobs, right? I was in like South Etobicoke, I was in Scarborough, like Markham, you name it. If I got the call and the introduction, I would be
Yep,
there. Yeah,
totally.
right?
I've
Yeah.
been there. Yep.
Yeah, and there was very little client qualification that was happening. I think my pricing was obviously very competitive because I was junior. I didn't really know what I was doing. I knew what I was doing to my own level, to the extent that I was charging for my time. Um, so the first 4 years, I trucked along like that. I got to a point where I was working full time, um, and I was working pretty steadily on projects with budgets of around $80,000. I remember thinking that was kind of my benchmark at the time. So 80,000 to fully redecorate the main floor of a house, or maybe throw in the media room or throw in the master bedroom. And that was suiting me fine until I got a couple of good big jobs. And you started to really see the opportunities. You started to see the possibilities of working with a client that had a healthier budget, that was more adventurous, as well as needed more than just decor. So in late 2018, I was approached to do my first renovation job, and I was nervous. I was really scared. And I made some phone calls to some of our mutual friends saying, can I do this? Can I do this? And I remember one of them saying, like, what are you worrying about? Just do it. You can do this. You know what you're doing. And luckily, so this was it was actually a full home gut. So with a small extension, which is also a very typical Toronto project, right? Pop out the back and make
maximize
the
your
kitchen
footprint on
bigger.
your lot.
Yeah,
Make it as big as you can, but keep the exterior walls, keep the structure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a pretty common scope of work as well. And the client had already selected a contractor who was very generous as well with his time. So he was my first introduction to working really closely with a contractor. We still keep in touch, and he was very open to my ideas. He was very open to educating me on his ideas. His trades were good communicators. So that was also an excellent first start to renovations. And that really set the bar higher for me from that point forward. I started to get a real taste for the larger scope. I loved what was possible when you get to take the drywall down and open up a few walls. Because I'm only educated as a decorator, there is a limit to what my licensing allows. But in working with the contractor and with engineers, I was able to learn a lot from them. So I've always, treaded very carefully around that. I don't want to get ahead of myself in making recommendations that are beyond my insurance scope of work, but I'm happy to express my ideas and then work with the professionals that can make those decisions. That led to a couple of other projects of that similar size. And then we hit COVID. During COVID, I scaled back a little bit. I still had a couple of active projects going. I had at this point in my career brought on contractors to work with me. So for like kind of the middle 5 years, I had between 2 and 3 contractors working with me at most points in time.
Just to clarify for those listening, when you say contractors, you don't mean construction. You mean like freelance designers,
you got it,
or people like that who are helping you in your business.
Yeah. Exactly. So freelance designers and admins, like a virtual admin, but she was sitting in the office with me. And we were working out of my house. So I had a decent sized 3rd floor office space. So every day we'd all, grab our lunch bags, truck up the 3 flights of stairs, tiptoe past my kids' rooms that were probably napping. And that was our little space. So throughout COVID, I maintained 2 part-time contractors, one in an admin capacity and one as a designer. And we kept doing projects of that size. So now I'd say the average scope of our projects had increased to a budget of, say, between 200 and 250,000. And my relationships with suppliers were getting stronger. I was understanding the pricing model better. We were able to predict our profits a bit better, which I know is a whole other topic. And then as I came out of COVID, there was work, right? Because there was a lot of people that wanted to renovate during COVID, and we were busy. I also started planning the rebuild of my own house during that time. So heading out of COVID, I had 2 contractors. I ended up leasing a space for our office rather than working from home because we're going to be renovating my house. And that's for me when, the rubber kind of hit the road. I had a moment where I realized, okay, COVID's over, knock on wood. The projects are getting bigger. I got to do this. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. So it was another tipping point where I just thought, enough with contractors. Like, no offense to contractors, but they have their own goals, right? They have their own allegiances and their own career goals. And typically they're also running their own company. So at any point in time, they will tell me they don't have time for me and they're doing their own thing. So there was just one day where I sat down, I put 3 job postings on Indeed. I thought about what my dream team looked like, called my accountant, and I said, I think I've got this right, but I think I can afford this. And she did the numbers with me and she's like, yeah, you can do this. And by June of 2022 or 2020, 2021, it's all a blur. 2022. By May of 2022, I had a full team of 3 full-time employees. So I had an
wow.
operations admin and 2 designers.
Okay, I feel like that's a whole other episode we can have you back to talk about. Is
we can talk about
that is a big change, and I know that from my own experience. So I would love to dive into that. Like that's a big change.
But it was a long time coming. I was staying up till midnight doing all the orders. And once I started to realize like my time is worth something, and my kids needed more from me at that age because they're staying up later and they have activities and all this. And I just thought, I'm doing all of the work of 3 people and I'm probably not doing it well. And if I get 3 people in to help me and we can therefore take on more work and I can actually enjoy my evenings again, it's going to be worth it. And, thankfully it was. So far we're still paying the bills.
So, and you're not just doing well, you are thriving. And I want us to talk about that. But I love that you made that commitment and that decision. And you didn't just make it willy-nilly, right? You called your accountant, you looked at the numbers. Can we afford this? Yes, I think we can. And you were really smart about and strategic about the roles that you needed to hire as well.
That's true. Yeah, I knew I needed an operations/admin person. I knew I needed a senior designer. I needed a body double, basically, and then a supplementary designer, whether it was a junior or an intermediate.
If your senior designer's listening, you are Michaela's body double.
She's very well aware of this. Yeah.
That's so cute. I love that.
So it was during that time then that the brand started to kind of itch me in the back of my mind, right? I was like, there's just something quite not right here. I'm ready for bigger things. I've got this full-time team, which means I can forecast better, I can predict, I can schedule. And I also now have revenues that I have to hit because I've got payroll responsibilities.
Yeah.
Which means I need to be making a more concentrated effort on our marketing. And at this exact time, a good friend of mine from my previous career, when I was an HR consultant at TELUS, she was in marketing at TELUS, and she had decided to go out on her own. And she had started a couple of her own companies, retail companies, over the previous 10 years. And I would say her retail products were a success, but what was even more of a success was how she branded them and how she marketed them. Mm-hmm. So she decided, enough with retail. I'm really good at marketing, and I'm going to become a marketing consultant, essentially. Yeah, so that happened at the same time. So here I was going out on my own, she was going out on her own, and I said, I would love to work with you again. We worked really well together in our past. Let's do this. And I thought, okay, if I'm going to be investing between $3,500 and $4,500 a month in this whole exercise of marketing, social media, branding, I better make sure I'm putting forward the right brand. Mm-hmm. And if I'm trying to expand my audience, let's expand it under the right brand.
Yeah.
So I was still Mint Decor, but the industry had taken a real swing by this point, 2022, to a personal brand. The personal brand seemed to really be reigning supreme, right?
Totally.
Yeah. And if you were referring somebody to me, you weren't necessarily referring Mint Decor. You were saying, we worked with Michaela at Mint Decor. Mm-hmm. Your name was still very present in that referral.
I think that's an important conversation. I just want to pause the conversation there for a second, because I think that's an important distinction. A lot of designers have this conversation inside our groups, inside Designers Room, and they're like, I don't know what to name my company. Do I use my name or do I do something else? And I think it's important to really look at, you can, and we're going to talk about that, you can change your name and there's no big deal about it. And I think that's what this is going to be really telling and really helpful for a lot of designers who are listening, but also that you are your company for the first many, many years until the time maybe you decide to scale yourself out of it or sell it. But the majority of interior designers or decorators are the principal. They are the ones making the decisions. They're the ones who are still wanting to do the design. And I think the personal brand, you're right, has become so important that's who they're referring. I used to go through this. I was like, should I not have named my company, my name? And then, 8 years in, probably around the same time, I was like, no, actually, I think this is a good thing, because now people are starting to see who I am. And there is a personal connection, because what we do is so we're so intimate with our clients. Okay, that's the wrong word. Not intimate.
No, but it
Well,
is,
I mean,
I
some
say
people
that
might
too.
be, but
Yeah, it is a very intimate relationship. I joke with our clients, within an hour of meeting you, I'm going to be standing in your bedroom,
I'm gonna be like,
right?
no, I'm gonna know what's in that drawer and what's on that
Yeah,
shelf.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm going to be asking which side of the bed do you sleep on?
Yeah, totally, totally. So I think that was really a really interesting realization that you had, that the personal
Mhm.
brand was now not really a negative thing, which maybe you had a negative sort of connotation. You wanted to have this
Yeah, I
company
think it was
name that
about
was separate.
confidence. Yeah, I think it was confidence as well in the beginning. It was, terribly to admit this now, but I think I was feeling, well, who am I to have my own company?
Mm,
And, to people that have that feeling, I get it. It's like early imposter syndrome, but I'm telling you that the personal brand is really what reigns supreme right now. In 10 years, that could change. Maybe everyone will be
yep.
calling themselves, I don't know, like Velvet Design or something. But if you're struggling with your name, maybe just consider using your middle name or your last
Yeah.
name.
Yeah.
That's also an option. But I think it really it was the best call, and I should have done it years ago. But hindsight's always 2020.
So this marketing person, this friend of yours, so you decide, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to hire this person to help me. Did she help you with coming up with and deciding to change the name of your company, among other
Yes.
things?
So yeah. So I said to her, look, if we're gonna do this, let's do this right. Let's put the right foot forward, a new foot forward. And I think I need to change from Mint Decor. I think I need to go to my name. And so we just kind of workshop that a little bit. Is it Michaela Burns Design, Michaela Burns Interiors? And then she contracted a graphics design team to put together a few different logos with I think a few of those different iterations. And it became pretty obvious to us that Michaela Burns Interiors made the most sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so
Okay.
that she was definitely part of that process. But I do have one other funny story about how I decided to rebrand
Tell us. I
because
want to hear it.
in 2023, wait, it involves a swear word. Is that okay?
That's okay. We'll just mark this one explicit.
Explicit.
So Vera, if you're listening, you need to put a little
Yeah,
E in
explicit.
front of this.
Yeah. So
Cover
maybe it
your
was late.
kids' ears.
Yeah, maybe it was late 2022. But we had a client, a family we were working with, and they were Italian. And the husband, it's kind of like early 40s Italian, grew up in Toronto in the Italian neighborhood. And we've been working together for about 6 months. And then one day he asked me, where did you come up with the name Mint Decor? And people would ask me that all the time. And so I explained him the story. And he said, oh, okay. So it's not really what I thought. I'm like, well, what did you think? And he said, well, it reminds me of like in high school, guys would say like, oh man, your car is like fucking mint. And from that moment forward, I was like, we are rebranding. It is
Got
time.
it. Yeah. I love that. That's true. Like that's mint. I mean, that's
Yeah.
good. I feel like,
Yeah.
was that maybe like a 90s cool like slang term? You don't hear people say that as much anymore, but you're
No,
right.
not anymore. Yeah. And yeah. So yeah, it was time. Like when people could start to kind of use our company name to like make fun of us or make fun of other people, it was time
Right.
to change it.
But not only did you change your name, so this is me like sitting back, following you on Instagram, like we're chatting from time to time or like seeing each other at events and things. But I remember seeing all of a sudden it was like new name, new brand. It wasn't just a new name. It was an
You're right.
entirely different vibe. And
It
I'm not saying
was.
the
Yeah.
previous, it just was a different vibe. And I remember thinking, whoa, look what Michaela's doing. I think this is amazing. I'm so excited
Thank
for
you.
her. And I feel like I probably thought to myself, like, yes, it's about time. Like I wouldn't have thought of it before, but
Hmm.
seeing what you've done just in your visual representation of your brand through your website, through your Instagram, and guys, definitely please go follow Michaela on Instagram. But it really, it's up leveled how you come across truthfully. And
Hmm.
I don't know, and I'm
Hmm.
curious
Hmm.
to hear from you, was that part of the goal? And if it was, like, has it succeeded? Are you attracting a different clientele? Do you think the brand has anything to do with that? Or is that just your years of
Hmm.
cumulative experience that you're slowly getting bigger, bigger projects? I'm curious how
Well,
much you think the brand had to do with that, or the rebrand.
I think it's both. I think that our years of experiences have helped us up level our projects, and therefore we wanted a brand that was reflective of that. But it was very intentional. I felt like my branding before Mint Decor had a real softness to it. Even the font and the colors we used, they were understated. It almost felt a bit meek in hindsight. Um,
Mm.
And Michaela Burns Interiors is it's a powerful statement to put your own name out there. And the font, the branding colors we used they're higher contrast. It's a larger, more present font, whereas we were using a script font before. It gave me what's the word? Like, it kind of gave me, the new brand gave me a venue to express us in our, like, as I wanted us to be seen. So, we did a branding photo shoot reflecting those colors as well. We used more like deeper jewel tones in what we wore in the setting of the photo shoot. And it wasn't this soft feminine brand anymore. It wasn't like a harsh masculine brand either, but I just felt like it was more mature and confident. And that really then gave us a platform on which to grow. And Elizabeth, who is the marketing media guru that I've been working with, has been so encouraging of that as well. Like we meet every week. We still have lots of ideas that we want to play out. So rebranding to me felt like this really big deal. Oh my gosh, I'm going to change my name. Everything's going to change. But from a legal perspective, I was only still a sole proprietorship at that time. The bank doesn't care. The bank and the CRA doesn't care. Your name is just your personal name. You can call yourself whatever company you want, but the business is under your personal name. So the paperwork was not a big deal. I'd say, not to get into the nitty gritty, but the most annoying part of rebranding is just trying to change your Gmail accounts. Google Business is no easy feat. Yeah.
Right.
But rebranding ended up being this really great excuse to get back in touch with everyone who we met over the last 10 years. Because we crafted, we can talk, if you want to, we can talk about, one second, my headphones. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
So we had kept a log, or we'd kept like a database of all of the people who had contacted us since the beginning. And it was a great chance to be like, hey, remember us? We now have a new name, and this is what we've been up to lately. And we crafted a couple of different targeted emails. One was to existing clients, one was to existing vendors, and one was to clients who we had done proposals for but had never selected us. And others were for people that had just done some tire kicking inquiries. So often I feel like I don't want to bother people. I don't want to put something in their inbox that looks like spam, but this was such a great excuse to get back out in front of people.
And did you get a lot of responses from those emails?
We really did. Yeah, we really did. And it was all positive. And a lot of people replied saying, it's about time. This is great. Like this is where you should be. I'm so proud of you. It was very encouraging.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I mean, that does speak to the power of emails. I'm telling designers all the time, start a newsletter. It doesn't have to be frequent. You don't have to feel like you're spamming. You want to stay top of mind. Let's let people know what you're up to. People are curious, even if they haven't hired you yet, or if they've hired you in the past, you stay top of mind for them so they can refer you to someone else, or they'll call you again for the next project. It's just goes to show how powerful that is. I love that. I love that you targeted it, actually. And thank you for sharing that you sent an email to your past clients. You sent an email, or whatever it was, you sent to the past clients, then you probably sent a slightly different email to your vendors, right?
That's right.
And then whoever else.
And then to clients, because through our proposal system, we can see every proposal we ever wrote, and we also can see if we won the client or not. So the people that we didn't win, we sent a slightly different email. And we kept it short, it's just a reintroduction, just enough to try to, put us back in their list of contacts.
And so do you send a regular email now?
I do send a monthly newsletter now. And that was all part of the rebranding plan. It took us a few months. We rebranded in November, and we didn't actually get the newsletter off the ground until February. But that's okay. It was in the plans. Okay. It just takes a lot of coordinating to get there.
It does. And when I was sending my monthly newsletters to my design clients, past, present, and potential, it was monthly, and they loved it. People loved it. And I would get past clients responding like my beautiful, beautiful first client ever, who is no longer with us. She's now passed on. Harriet, I remember she used to always reply to them, and she would say, it's so wonderful to see that you're doing so well. And then she would actually call me and hire me back to, can we recover these 2 chairs? Or, the sofa's not working anymore because my husband has a hard time getting in and out. Let's replace it with 2 chairs. And so she became a repeat client for me because I was top of mind in those emails. It's like staying in touch. And
that's
I don't
right.
know if you're like me or if those listening are like me. I have a hard time staying in touch with people, and it doesn't mean that I don't love them and I don't think about them or care about them. This almost like forces you to stay in touch with people, and then the right people who want to stay in touch with you will reconnect.
Yeah, no, and I'm thankful that those people like Harriet exist, that take the time to reach out, because a lot of us read these newsletters and enjoy them, but not very many of us take the time to reply and say, Rebecca, this was
True.
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, I encourage anyone who's on my email list, please hit reply. I do actually read them. It does come to me and I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. So rebranding, let's fast forward to the most recent big deal that I've seen, your house. You just built this beautiful custom home on the same lot where your previous house was. It was this massive undertaking from what I followed on social media. Beautifully architecturally designed home. I got to tour it with a group. It was really amazing. You did such a great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
And how much has that affected? You rebranded knowing that this was in the works, right? You had this project in the works as well. How much has that tied into, and how much has that now affected the type of jobs that you are attracting?
Sure. Yeah. So building our own house was an amazing opportunity. I had the opportunity to be my own dream client. And I tried to look at it that way, right? Like, I want the dream client that says yes to everything, that gives me a budget and sticks to it.
Right.
and so in some ways my husband became this guinea pig. Like, I actually made him sit down so I could give him a budget presentation.
Oh, that's so cute.
And because I wanted to show, like, I wanted to kind of show myself, because it was a big undertaking, right? It was a large home and we were doing everything soup to nuts. So I wanted to show myself that I can plan this from the beginning and 18 months later it to be done and on budget. And I also needed to have that in my back pocket if for when my husband started complaining about how expensive it was, because inevitably anyone who's building a home will start complaining. And I could always just hold up my spreadsheet and say, like, I stayed on budget. The cement guys might not have,
exactly,
but I stayed on budget. Yeah.
It's not my fault. We need extra shoring. That was not in the budget.
Yeah,
right?
That is exactly the conversation. The shoring.
Yep.
It was the shoring. So that was one part of it that was really exciting for me. It was a chance for me to meet some really top of the line trades. When we went looking for a builder and an architect, we went looking for the best that we could afford. We wanted people that were bringing us all of their expertise, and obviously we're ready to build what we had in mind, but we wanted them to take our idea, our visions, and add their expertise to it and really bring it to the next level. And the difference between there's a lot of different architects out there, and it really depends on what your budget is. But the architect we ended up hiring might have been $30,000-$40,000 more than the next guy. And I most likely increased the value of my home tenfold of that 30,000-40,000 or more, right? Like, in hindsight, the math was an absolute no-brainer, because a very skilled architect brought so much to the initial vision, as well as he brought a really high degree of professionalism to the whole process, especially in Toronto, when you have to go through a committee of adjustments because you're having to make changes to zoning bylaws that were done in the 1920s. You want someone who knows what they're doing. And I know we said we might talk about this as another episode as well, but architects come in all different shapes and sizes, as do their services. And we chose an architect that is known for staying involved right till the very end.
And you know what? That was evident, because when I went to your house, the architect was there and he was talking about his involvement in the project. And it's interesting because a lot of us as designers have worked with different architects, and sometimes they're just like, here's the plans, bye, see ya.
Bye. Exactly.
And he was not that. So to explain a little bit what you mean by that, like he was involved.
Yeah, so we gave him an initial vision. I had drawn a facade of a front of a home that I liked. I'd seen a couple of styles of homes, actually an architect in Alabama that we follow, and I had adapted it to scale to my lot size. But I'm a decorator, right? So it looked okay, I thought, but it looked like a cartoon drawing in comparison to what he did. But anyway, I gave him my vision, and when I interviewed 6 different architects, and
wow,
most of them,
6 different architects?
Yeah.
Woman, you're serious. That's so impressive. I don't know if I would have had the patience. I love that you did that.
Well, it was COVID.
Wow.
It was COVID. They were all
Oh,
over
yeah.
Zoom.
That's fair. Yeah, yeah, okay.
And
You had lots of time.
the majority of them said something to me, which I'm glad I'm saying this out loud right now because I'm going to try to remember it for future. But the majority of them looked at my inspirations and my little drawing and said, I could do something like that. And I didn't want them to do something like that. Right. Or they would say,
Mm,
I've done something like that. Whereas the architect we chose, he looked at it. He said, this is really interesting. Let me think about it. And he
mm.
came back to me a week later and he said, I've studied it. I've looked at the architect that was your inspiration. I've studied the angles, like the way he uses like volume and light. And I would really like to do this.
Wow. I just got
Yeah.
goosebumps actually. Like
Yeah.
that right there, what you just said is a really great example of if you really want, like on the other side, learning as the customer, how to
Yeah.
be as a designer. When a client
Yeah.
comes to you with the most incredible project, like being thoughtful, right? And
Mm-hmm.
showing up and then showing that you want the job. Like there's a lot to be
That's
said
right.
for that.
Yeah. And this wasn't the most expensive house he's ever done. It wasn't the biggest, it wasn't the fanciest, but I didn't feel that. I felt like he gave it some real thought and he said, I want this job. And so that's how we made that decision. And I knew he was involved all the way through just because of our conversations, but I don't think I really appreciated the full value of that until I'd worked
Mm,
on other projects for other clients where I never met the architect.
yeah, totally. So
Yeah,
when you say he's involved, like he would come to site or when the changes
right.
needed to be made, was he sketching those up? Was he helping troubleshoot? Like what?
That's
I
right.
mean, I know a
So,
little bit about that because I was at your house, but maybe
yeah.
explain to the listeners so they understand what that means.
So he worked very collaboratively with us to figure out the front facade because that was really an important, impact for us, and as well as the interior floor plans. And the two have to work obviously symbiotically. But I did respect and really admire the fact that he did those things at the same time, whereas some architects just do a floor plan and then kind of fit a facade onto the front of it. And
Mm,
we kept both in mind throughout. So he worked through the floor plan and he had a lot of great advice. And I pushed him. I remember us having this hilarious kind of ongoing argument about where the pantry door was going to be. And I said, I want the pantry door as close as possible to the garage because I want to unload the groceries from my car directly into the pantry. And we went back and forth on this, like probably for a month. Obviously, I won because I'm the client, but now,
and it
but
works very well, I have to say. Well done.
see, it works. It works exactly. So that was just a little thing that we struggled with, but it was great. So he was involved throughout. We did the floor plans, and then from that point, his team and my team worked collaboratively on the elevations. I
Mm,
really relied on his expertise when it came to thinking about the volume within the home. I think I don't want to say I think in 2D because we do 3D renderings of rooms, but I don't always think about how the room above or the stairway above is affecting what's happening underneath, right? So I
right.
felt like he really approached the project and his team would think about it, all three floors together, um, and the way the light travels throughout the home. That's something I learned a lot
Mm,
from him as well. And then he would make regular site visits. And then if whoever we ran into an issue, we luckily we probably um, avoided a lot of issues because we designed the entire house on paper first and we did full interior renderings that helped us work through some things. But there was the odd little thing, depending on where an air duct was going to go, we realized that it looked like it was a little bit too close to a door frame. And so we for example, in the front living room, we decided to bring the door frame forward to make it look like it, was standing out more from the wall. And then that meant we had to repeat that on the doorway into the dining room. And his team redrew the shop drawings for that, like really responsive.
yeah.
And right up to the very end, to when the landscaping came in, he was there and gave us some opinions on how the railing should be attached to the deck. I
Those are
actually just
little
got it.
things that you
Yeah,
often overlook. You don't think about those as being important details. And so it's really helpful to have a partner with you as you're
yeah,
going through them, especially like as a decorator or designer, there's a limit to where our expertise, like that's why we rely on our partners. We rely on our
that's
trades to
right.
give our clients the best experience. And so I say to designers all the time, like, you don't have to be the expert in everything. You don't have to have the answers, but you do have to have somebody who knows the answer or who can
That's
help
right.
advise.
You're right. But he was
Yeah.
a partner. That's a good way of putting it. We each brought our own ideas and expertise, and we're very open and respectful in sharing those with each other. So I learned a lot from him, and hopefully he learned a few things from me.
Are you open
like the
to
pantry
sharing?
door.
Can we share who this architect is? Because
Oh yeah, absolutely. We worked with Stan Macau, Macau Architecture.
And
Yeah.
he was a lovely man too. I got to hear him chat at your house and
Yes.
And talk about the project, and just such a lovely man. Okay, so by the way, for those listening, you need to go and find a picture of Michaela's house. I did do a little bit of a tour in my stories when I walked through, so maybe I'll make sure I share some of those when your episode airs again.
Yeah.
But that front elevation, that front exterior of your home is so striking. It is so beautiful. You can tell it was done by an architect, and it's just so refreshing in our city because like not every house is that well thought out. A lot of people just maximize, they do the minimum they need to do on the exterior so that they can, maximize their budget and like the layout. And I mean, I could go on and on. I think you've done such a great job with your home. Has working with an architect opened up more opportunities to work with architects of that caliber?
Yeah. And the builder. So, we didn't talk about the builder, but our architect recommended a builder who had worked on homes of a very good caliber and had, great trades. So yes, I have now gotten another project from the builder of a similar size, as well as a couple of introductions from the architect. So absolutely, like align yourself with the people you want to work with. And the other, even getting back to the rebranding, I said to my team, like, it's a little bit of if you build it, they will come. We have built this really beautiful home. It was fully photographed and will be in House and Home magazine in September.
Yay,
and we have to be ready. Thank you. We have to be ready for the phone to start ringing. I was like, I want our systems to be up leveled. I want us to be ready. Our branding, we have to, when that issue comes out and people are starting to think about us for a full home and they go and hit our Instagram or our website, it has to look like we're ready for them.
Love it.
So that was another big goal of the rebranding. And over the course of the year leading up to that publication date, because we had almost a year's advance notice of when the publication was going to be coming out, we're using that year to make sure we're ready.
I love
and
that.
To make sure our team is ready.
I love that you're being so intentional and also positive. Like, nobody knows what's going to happen, but if you don't anticipate the best case scenario and get yourself set up for it, you will not be ready. I love that.
That's
right.
I
can't wait.
Yeah.
It's going to be beautiful. That is our time for today. This has been such a great conversation. I feel like we could keep talking for hours. I have so many questions. We're going to have you into Designer's Room to really go behind the scenes and pull back the curtain. So designers, if you're a member of Designer's Room, just hold your horses because Michaela's going to come and join us in there. But before we leave today, can you please share a last nugget of wisdom with our listeners?
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely a nugget of optimism, like you said. That I refer back to as like a mantra. And it was actually something I learned from my husband's boss like 10 years ago. But the saying goes, you take what you get, but you only get what you ask for.
You take what you get, but you don't get.
You only get what you ask for.
You take what you get, but you only get what you ask for. I love that.
Right. And we think of this a lot in our office. Even just this morning, we're looking at some pricing from a vendor. We're seeing some items at a better price elsewhere. And we called our vendor and we said, we want to keep working with you, but we need this price. And they said, okay. And it was that easy. Right. And of course, there's a lot more to that, right? You have to have a positive relationship that's respectful and all of this, but don't be afraid to ask for it.
I love that advice. It is so, so true. And especially for a lot of us women listening to this, that sometimes are afraid to ask for what we want, are afraid of how it's going to come across or what the person's going to think of us, or maybe they don't want it. Maybe I'll lose the business, or maybe they won't want to work with us. If you don't ask, you don't know. And I love that example. Congratulations to you. Boss lady, look at you go. All right. Where can everybody here find and follow you?
Sure. So our website is mbinteriors.ca, Michaela Burns Interiors. And on Instagram, we are Michaela Burns Interiors as well.
I love that. I like how you did the MB to make it easy so people didn't have to spell your name online. See, you found a workaround for that.
We did.
Well done. Amazing. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you, Rebecca.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I have so many nuggets. I took like 2 pages of notes while Michaela was talking. Just a lot of really great nuggets in there, and just ideas for those of you maybe who are starting out that you can start at home staging. Some of you are hesitant to start your business or take that leap of faith until you have everything figured out. And it's just a great example of, work at another company, work at a firm, whether it's staging or a design firm. Maybe it's a vendor. Get your feet wet, get in other people's houses, see how it's done, learn from others before going in and making those mistakes. She talks about also how the staging was a really great launch pad for moving into decorating, and how you don't know what you don't know. And I love that idea of, I'm not sure I can do this. And then her friend saying, you've got this. And how sometimes we just need to push ourselves outside of our comfort zone to level up and take on those bigger projects and go after those projects. I mean, her last nugget of wisdom says it all. Basically you don't get if you don't ask, right? And it's so true in so much in life. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I would love to hear if you've gone through a similar story of rebranding. I do mean it. Like, send me a DM on Instagram. I always love to hear from our listeners. It's so helpful to know what's resonating. And please head on over to iTunes and leave us a comment, leave us a review. It would mean a lot to me and to our guests. And give Michaela a follow. You will love seeing what she has done with her brand. And I hope Michaela doesn't fault me for saying this, but if you scroll back far enough, you can see the shift and the change of where she was and where she is now, and what she's doing now, and the projects she's doing now are just a dream. So I hope you guys enjoyed that episode with Michaela, and I'll see you soon.